Additionally, the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, conducted a truck parking study published in 2020. This slide, which was presented previously at Public Safety Committee, shows the existing private truck stops that existed at that time. The CCR also requested an analysis of land that could potentially be used by the city to develop a truck parking lot or facility. This map shows in pink the properties that are industrially zoned, have an improvement value of $10,000 or less, and this resulted in approximately 1,600 total vacant properties, which comprise 7,800 acres of land. These plots range in size from less than 1 acre all the way to 176 acres. I would now like to present some options for this committee to consider in response to these CCRs. The first option takes advantage of an existing Public Works Department on-street parking restriction process. The graphics that are in blue are the current existing processes that Public Works has to evaluate on-street parking. This process begins with a 311 request, where Public Works dispatches an engineer to conduct an assessment of the area of concern. If a traffic safety issue is verified, then restricted parking signage is installed. That restricted parking signage is the result of a separate 311 request, and these two different 311 requests have an SLA of 30 days each. If no traffic safety issue is verified by the Public Works engineer, then a petition is required to restrict parking. If the necessary number of signatures from property owners is achieved, then restricted parking signage can be installed. The process being proposed for your consideration are the graphics in brown, where if an issue is not related to traffic safety, but it is related to oversized vehicle parking, then an evaluation of the request would be conducted by code enforcement or SAPD SAFE. If quality of life or community welfare issues are verified by the truck parking, then oversized vehicle restricted parking signage will be installed. In order to take advantage of this proposed process, an ordinance change would be requested. The current ordinance, City Code Section 19-193, allows the city to restrict parking at all times in areas where it has erected a sign. The locations where signs have been erected are periodically updated by ordinance that adds or removes certain locations from the appropriate schedule. The proposed change would be to amend City Code Section 19-68 Schedule G to include oversized vehicles, specifically oversized commercial vehicles, as a specific subcategory of no parking at any time, with exceptions that align with Section 19-194, which prohibit oversized vehicle parking in residential areas. Those exceptions would be when they are actively loading or unloading or making emergency repairs, and an exception would be present for recreational vehicles. An additional option for consideration for ordinance change would be fines. The current fine structure for an oversized vehicle parked in a residential zone is $500 under Section 19-38. Additionally, Section 19-38 has a typical fine for parking in a no parking zone of $35. A proposed change would be to amend Section 19-38 to increase the fine for parking an oversized vehicle in a no parking zone from $35 to $500. There is also the previous ordinance change that was proposed, which is the 1,000-foot buffer. This would require an amendment to City Code Section 19-194 and proposes specifically to restrict parking in non-residential areas within 1,000 feet from residentially zoned areas between midnight and 6 a.m., except when actively loading and unloading and when making emergency repairs. Installation of signage would be cost prohibitive with this ordinance because it would be citywide. If an ordinance change takes place, regardless of any option pursued, this slide demonstrates the enforcement approach that San Antonio Police Department would take. SAFE officers would begin educating drivers and residents about upcoming changes through HOA contacts and social media outreach, and once restricted parking signage is installed, SAFE officers would take the primary responsibility for initial enforcement. It would become a regular assignment or check-in for SAFE in the area. SAFE would also coordinate with patrol officers to ensure calls made to dispatch are handled in the same manner. The graphic demonstrates the typical escalation process for SAPD for truck parking violations. Officers would have the discretion to issue a warning first, and then citations would follow if warnings prove ineffective. Towing would only occur in accordance with the general manual, such as when vehicles pose a traffic hazard. Staff is requesting input from the committee on options presented today and to move the CCRs to a B session. This slide shows the options for your consideration. I will be present if you have any questions, and Director Michael Shannon is also here for questions.
Thanks so much, Maria, and thanks to Council Members Balaez and Dr. Rocha Garcia for bringing this forward. Before moving to comments, would you like to speak, Councilman Balaez?
So, thank you. I haven't heard a city council person yet that we've spoken to who've signaled any opposition to this, and so I don't have a reason to believe that I'll hear any today. And so I'll skip over the part about why this is necessary. I think we covered it. What I want to do is propose something. And I wasn't going to do this until I saw the presentation, that we not send it to a B session, that we send it straight to an A session. Let me tell you why. I filed the CCR in May of 2022. 3 years have passed, right? We do UDC updates faster than a simple ordinance like this. We approved a major, I'm sorry, not a major league, but a minor league baseball park faster than we do a UDC, an ordinance like this. We draft a $4 billion budget faster than we do a simple ordinance than this. We did a charter amendment, major charter amendments faster than we do with this. And so Councilwoman Havrda and I were at a really fun town hall this weekend. And two things were mentioned, right? One, I mentioned that, if you can't trust us with the little things, you can't trust us with the big things. And then my friend, Councilwoman, said something really that stuck with me, and that is that City Hall has to work for you, right? And I've been sitting here looking at this presentation and really thinking about those two things. And I think that the slow grind of government is important because we want to make sure we get things right. But 3 years it kind of shocks the conscience, right? When we can accomplish all those other things as quickly as we've accomplished. And so my request is for y'all to think about, does anybody here really think that this is going to change at B session? That there's going to be a much more interesting discussion at B session that we're not going to have here? The other thing that I want to remind you all is that each and every one of you have gotten complaints about this in your districts, right? And we have, and by the way, none of us got requests from our districts to build a ballpark, right? And so we have, I think we got an obligation to listen to the people who are customers, right? Who are asking us to do something. This is really important to them, and it speaks to how unimportant it is to us when we take this much time. And if you can tell, I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated, right? But I'm equally grateful, Councilwoman, because you could have just put this on for the next month, but you put it on today, and so thank you for that. As for signage, my only request is that the signage be big enough for people to see. We did those panhandling signs, and they're really small, and nobody really can see them. And so last thing I want is to be unfair to the truck drivers who are, if they can't see the signs, then that doesn't really help anybody, because that means that it's going to cost them $500. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that, it's evident that this is a no parking zone. Lastly, I'll tell you, there's two things. One is, what this is not is a witch hunt directed at truck drivers. These are small business owners. These are moms and dads who pay the bills with their trucks. And what this is a balance of interests between the residential areas, nearby commercial zones, and the interest of truck drivers. And we got rules, and those rules need to be followed, right? And so I'm sensitive to the need for truck drivers to have parking, and I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a conversation. I know that Dr. Rocha Garcia is equally hopeful that we have a second conversation about creating facilities or identifying facilities for these people to park, right? Because that's compassion too, that's equity. Lastly, it's a thank you. Thank you to Robert Abraham and thank you to Melanie Sanders. These two people have been the pointy end of the stick and some of the squeakiest wheels in town, really trying to bring attention to the plight of neighborhoods, having these trucks near them, and the plight of apartment complexes, and the plight of school bus drivers and parents who can't feel safe when trucks are parked there. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I don't disagree with you that this could go to a session. I will listen to I'll entertain the motion in a moment. I just want to make the point, though, that it has taken a long time, and that was a fun forum. But there was a lot of public engagement, specifically because of the truck drivers and that whole industry was being affected. So I appreciate that. We went through the process, and I'm glad we're here now. Are there any comments from anybody? Councilwoman Aldana Garrido.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a couple of comments. First off, to address your comments, Councilman Pelaez. Yeah, I think it's taken way too long. I agree that we do need community input, but sometimes this is bureaucracy at its finest, and residents have complained to all of us about this being a problem, so we need to listen and act accordingly. I did have a couple of questions, though. I think it's interesting to compare slide 8 through to slide 16, because you're seeing where the citations are, but there's also not parking options for them. So I think it's worth noting. I mean, you're seeing a lot of citations on one part, but there's not a lot of parking options. And so, as Councilman Pelaez was saying, I mean, these are small business owners, and so I don't necessarily like the thought of fining them or ticketing them if we're not providing them options. I also thought that on slide 19, the signage option, I don't think that's a good option at all, just because we're constantly going to be reacting. We just dealt with an issue in District 7 where we put no parking on one side of the street and then they park on the other. It's, we're just constantly chasing the problem. It ties up resources, and it's just not us acting smart as a city at all. The TxDOT study, I'm also meh about, because that's going to take forever. I don't necessarily know that we would have any actionable follow-ups from there that we can't think of ourselves. So to me, that's just going to delay it even further. I like the buffer, the option of the 1,000-foot buffer. My only question on that is, why did we put the timeframes? Because we're still, I remember block walking and seeing these 18-wheelers park in neighborhoods at 2 p.m. So I'm not sure what the thought process was on the time frame.
Councilwoman, I can address that question. When we made that recommendation on option A, we looked at what other cities have done to address the problem. And based on that, what we identified is the vehicles tend to park overnight, and then they stay for an extended period of time. So if you don't allow them to park overnight, then you're discouraging them from parking there to begin with, because it's typically the overnight that where the parking starts, and then they just keep them there for the entire day. So that was the reason why we had proposed to do it overnight to discourage that behavior.
Okay, yeah, because we do definitely see some trucks parked during the day, which is just as bad of a hazard as it is at nighttime. So, but I think the long story short here is that we need more parking options. Probably in districts like 8 and 9 or 6 where people are getting cited, people are getting ticketed, and but they also need an option to go somewhere. They need to park somewhere. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Isn't that Councilman Rocha Garcia's CCR? Isn't she talking about designated parking facility?
Yes, it is.
So what was the conclusion on that?
We did an analysis of available land that could potentially be used for a truck parking lot or facility.
Okay.
So I guess to add to that, Councilman, we did a couple of things. One, TxDOT has been conducting studies of parking issues for, specifically for big trucks across the state of Texas. So they published that report and they identified the gaps associated with each of the districts that they serve. Right now, Houston is focusing on, TxDOT is working with Houston on the Houston district to address those gaps. And what we are requesting is that they focus in the San Antonio district, so they prioritize us to be able to come up with solutions for truck drivers. Now, what Maria mentioned, we did do an analysis, which is,
And if I may, though, I mean, TxDOT has been studying Bandera Road since 1997, so I'm not hopeful that anything is going to get done quickly.
understood, Councilwoman. So we identified in slide 18 vacant land that potentially could serve as a parking facility. That is for discussion of the committee. We're not making a recommendation for the city to build a facility or to go into the process of partnering perhaps with the private sector to do that. We wanted to give you an idea where, I think that was Councilman Maki Rodriguez who requested this at the last time that we briefed the committee, what areas of town had potential vacant land if the city council decided to pursue that as an alternative.
And I do think that this is fair, because we do need to provide them options. I feel that obviously we'd have to work with the council members, because we do want to have that buffer for if we're going into highly residential districts, we'll want to work with the council members to work with the residents on what that looks like and how it can be done in a good way. But I do think it is interesting to see where the citations are and also the lack of parking. It seems like.
Right, and
That's a
also on slide
no-brainer.
18, you also see the lack of vacant land on that side of town as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So just a second, just given that, all of that discussion, there's not a recommendation now for Councilwoman Rocha Garcia's CCR, or it's?
So what we have is, if you go to slide 25, so we have a couple of options that we can move forward to an A session. The first one is the first recommendation that we developed to create a 1,000 feet buffer from residential areas to expand or to restrict parking, and specifically in those areas, and of course, we would enforce it. Option B is a more targeted approach, and this will be basically addressing those areas of town where residents are calling about having an issue. And by changing the ordinance, it'll give us the authority to restrict parking only for big trailers, so instead, or oversized vehicles. So residents could continue to park, but it's only those large trucks that will be prohibited from parking there. That'll be permanently or 24 hours a day. It also increases the fine to $500, and we felt this could be a good option for the committee because it targets those areas and it doesn't limit those other areas where these trucks are parking today, that perhaps it doesn't pose a problem for everyone. Mm-hmm. So we felt that could give us a good balance to address both CCRs. And then we're not making a recommendation, to answer your question, Councilwoman, on building a parking facility. We just identified the vacant land. We're open to hear from the committee. That was something that you would like for the city to explore.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I think that's, the bigger point, right, is made a couple times now. It's taken long to get through this pipeline, but, I mean, we're having a difficult, complicated discussion right now about this, and every time we brought it back to public safety, there's something new that we're bringing forward. So, yeah, I mean, I think we, of course, I'll entertain a motion, but let's move it forward with what we've got, but not, delay based on studies. Although I think we probably have to bring it back again and again because there's nuances to this issue that are maybe not going to be addressed when it goes to an A session.
What I would say, if the committee hypothetically chooses one of the two options, let's say option B, we move forward that to council, the ordinance is approved, it provides more tools to address the issue today. Mm-hmm. If the council wanted the city to consider building a facility for these trucks to park, then that would need a different conversation because of the level of investment. It will probably would need to be a bond project because it's expensive.
I think we can also look at other city-owned properties or our partners like VIA. There's, some lots that maybe we could use across the city that are owned by our partners that we can use. But we have to be creative to move it quickly. Okay, Councilman White. Oh.
There you go. You want to go back in?
Well, sorry, to close off, yeah, I mean, I do think that both of these options are, none of them are the silver bullet answer, but I'm also not sure we're going to find one, right? This is a nuanced, complicated problem. I'm leaning definitely towards option A. Option B seems way too reactive for me. The only thing I would say is address truck parking shortages, that COSA will work with TxDOT. Again, I don't necessarily understand the need of us working with TxDOT. We could do this stuff on our own. So I feel TxDOT is just going to slow us down. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thanks, Chair. Thank you, Councilman Pelaez, for bringing this forward, and something you said up there a few minutes ago stuck with me, and it's really about the balance of interests here, and strong supporters of small business. I think we all are around this table, but we also have to remember that our primary responsibility day to day is to protect our neighborhoods and our people, and this is an issue that the councilman's correct that we get calls, if not weekly, at least every other week, about these oversized vehicles parking directly next to our neighborhoods. So this has taken too long. I'm glad we're here. I am for option A as well. I think we need to get that in place and go from there. I would also hope that there's going to be some signage around these areas as well, so that we can let these truck drivers know where they can and can't park. But here's my concern. Is it going to be SAPD that's going to be enforcing this?
Yes, primarily, yes.
All right. So I'll tell you that just in the last week, we've gotten calls on people parking, where there's no parking signs next to schools, and there's pickup and drop off, and parents are getting really frustrated where that people are parking where they're not supposed to. And this may be a question for Chief, and we talked to our safe officer and other folks with the department. There's just not enough personnel to be able to enforce the rules. And so here we're going to have, potentially another ordinance in place that's going to require SAPD to enforce it. Do we think we're going to be able to do it?
One of the distinctions, reference to the issue you just mentioned, council member, is that, and it's a legal distinction, I guess. Those parents who are complaining about the cars being backed up, those cars are standing, not parking. So as long as they're in the car waiting, it's not a violation.
Well, and thank you for that. There's been instances though where there's no people in the cars. They're parking in areas that are clearly signed no parking, and what we've been told is our officers are stretched thin, right? I mean they're out there doing a bunch of things, and we can't always get somebody there to enforce these no parking areas. And so my question's just, are we going to be able to enforce a new ordinance like this?
Yeah, and I guess my response is I don't know how many calls would come in, but they are a low priority call.
Right.
As you
Yeah.
brought up. So when officers get around to it,
Yeah.
as they're knocking other calls off the board,
Yeah.
they would handle those types of calls, but it is something that would be low priority.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point, and I appreciate that, Chief, is that, budget season's coming up again here pretty soon, and these issues when we talk about having more officers out there and on patrol and on the streets, these issues sometimes get forgotten about. But because we have a shortage of police, we can't always enforce ordinances like this, and that's of great concern and to our citizens. And so I would ask us all to remember that as we move forward to budget season this year. Another quick question, how are we going to deal with appeals? If, a truck driver says, no, I wasn't within the 1,000 feet, how do we deal with that?
I think that's where we strike that balance between the two different proposed routes, where the 1,000 feet citywide, we can't put signs at citywide everywhere that's 1,000 feet from a residentially zoned area. Whereas if we do the targeted response, we can put the signs and the truck drivers will know and the officers will know this is a no parking zone for oversized trucks, and it reduces the scope that SAPD has to deal with for enforcement. And SAFE and Patrol can make these specific hotspot zones that are in the schedule a regular check-in, a regular assignment where it's not so reactive and they can be more proactive.
Well, I don't think that the sign issue, is mutually is exclusive to one or the other, right? We could still do option A, and where we are finding most of our issues, still make sure we get signs in those areas, right?
We can. That could be an option, Councilman, based on, we have the top 10 locations where we have citations, so that could be a consideration to add signage in those areas to avoid what you just described.
Yeah, I think we're going to have an ongoing evaluation of where the citations are coming from and continually be adding the signs over time.
Correct. And also, Councilman, I wanted to add, in addition to SAPD, CCDO and code enforcement also enforce that portion of the code when it comes to parking. So those are additional resources, not that we have more of, but they also have the authority to cite if there was a call.
Yeah, great. I mean, there is nothing more frustrating than when residents call us and they point out a clear code violation or a clear violation of some ordinance, and we have to say, listen, we're telling our code people, we're telling SAPD, but there's just not the bandwidth there to enforce these ordinances. And so we may as well not have them if we're not going to enforce them. So let's keep thinking about how we can be better in that regard. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman White. Councilwoman Dr. Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple of questions. The comments similar to Councilman Aldrete Gavito around that a lot of the violations, or this is actually the one situation where we don't get a lot of calls in District 1 about this, but a lot of the violations were on I-10. So I just make sure that we are thinking about long-term parking solutions for that. So just emphasizing the point that she made. Secondly, I know Councilmember Pelaez was here earlier, and he did mention this has taken a lot of time. I do want to commend city staff on the community engagement process, because I remember when y'all presented to us last year, that was some of the feedback. We actually had a couple of people come up from the small business community and present to us and say they didn't feel like they had an opportunity to present their voice in this. Obviously, they're going to be, there's more severe penalties for them. Basically, it's more difficult for them. So I understand why the feedback is what we received. But I was just curious about the town hall. Do you have a breakdown, maybe a backslide of the feedback, of like the number of people that were in the town hall and where they were from?
I can get you that information.
Okay. Approximately how many people was it?
I believe it was approximately a dozen participants from the community.
Okay, for the second one that included community members.
That's right.
And then the survey responses that you listed there from folks that are in the like truck driver community, were they also the same people in the town hall, or was it two different? It was a community survey and then the town hall?
There's a survey in October and then town halls in November. It's certainly possible that someone who took that survey was present in the town hall.
Okay, so, so obviously I guess the main feedback, and I want to just make sure that I understood the slide right. On slide 12, it just says, is it a struggle for you to find parking? The big percentage is yes, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I'm just trying to make sure that these folks are, they are a small part of our community, but they're still a part of our community as well, so that we're just figuring out long-term parking solutions for them. So echoing the chair's comments about pushing forward Councilwoman Rocha Garcia's CCR as well. And then the signage, so the signage issue, are we just gonna, basically, I understand the purpose for targeted signage, we can't go around, signs are expensive, as I'm learning, but is that just going to, like, if we put a sign up, or put signs up all over District 8, are they now just gonna move over to 9 and start parking there? Like, how do we make sure that folks know that there's a citation, and just like a penalty that they're not supposed to do that?
The signs would describe the penalties. Typically on that signage, it'll say fine, and it'll have the range of that fine. Displacement concerns, I understand that, and that's why the more targeted approach is to still reserve places where it is legal to park on the street without just doing a blanket no parking in all streets around residential areas is one consideration.
And can we at least create like a map or something like that for at least the folks that responded to the survey and send it back to them and say, hey, these are the places that you can actually still park at? From a residential perspective?
So a couple of things, Councilwoman. Regardless of the option that we do, we are going to be working with our SAFE officers as they work with neighborhood associations to help us with the education piece of whatever ordinance or the change that this committee recommends to a session. The second thing, we'll continue to explore the map. We actually work with ITSE and created a tool.
Great.
That if you enter your address, similar to Find Your Council district, the challenge that we have that there are areas within the 1,000 buffer that may be industrial that is allowed to park, so that requires more work for us to be able to identify specific areas. We'll go back and check how timely that would be. Is it doable? Yes. It's just a matter of
Or
time to be
mainly
able to get those areas.
Yeah, understood. Mainly, or maybe even a more cost-effective option would be just to have an individual that can be available to help someone find parking within their area. So it's more of like a case support basis versus a tool if the tool is taking too long. I'm just thinking of ways for people, we can, because we did reach out, like, I remember last time we only had 2 people from the trucking community that responded, and now we have, I guess, contact for almost 100. So at least we have a more direct contact with those people, assuming we got their contact information.
I would have to check on that.
Okay. Just trying to figure out a way to be proactive. in
We
that
will look
support.
into that, Councilwoman. for
Okay,
sure.
awesome. And so I appreciate that. The last thing that I wanted to mention is Councilmember White was talking about enforcement. This is something that, while ours may not be oversized vehicle enforcement, but we do get a lot of calls about parking enforcement. So I wanted to say, would this be something, I know we just filed that CCR last week, would this be something that that CCR could address, like these types of calls?
I was thinking about that as
Okay.
well, Councilman, yes.
Okay,
yes.
perfect. So, well, we're hopeful that CCR, that will allow for reserve police officers to move it forward, to move forward low administrative tasks will help with the enforcement. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dr. Kaur. Does anybody have a motion?
It would be specific, right?
Yeah, I need a motion on which option.
I would move to use option A and advance it directly to A session.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. I will ask that there's a briefing to individual council members that aren't on this committee, just so A session is smooth.
And thank you, thank you to everybody. This is a big deal.
Get on the mic.
I do want to point out that 2 of our reporters were late because they couldn't find space to park. So immediate parking would be appreciated.
Okay, move on to items, I think we're going to take 5 and 6, is it?
Yes,
Together.
Chairwoman. These are our statistics for the fire department for calendar year 2024. So Chief Frausto will go over that presentation, and right after she concludes, then Chief McManus will provide the crime statistics for the police department for calendar year 2024. So Chief Frausto.
Good morning. Thank you. I Fire Chief Valerie Frosto. I'll be presenting an overview of the San Antonio Fire Department activity with a focus on the first quarter. So SAFD incidents by fiscal year. Here we see the total number of incidents handled by SAFD over the past 3 fiscal years. Medical incidents continue to rise, and they continue to be a majority of our responses, with, you'll see, a steady increase each year. Non-medical incidents have remained the same. Actually, they've remained relatively stable, with a slight increase from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 2024. Next slide is SAFD incidents for first quarter, and that's October through December of fiscal years 2023 through fiscal year 2025. So in this slide, looking at the first quarter of each fiscal year, we do see a similar trend. Medical incidents continue to increase year to year, with non-medical incidents remaining relatively stable. Next slide is SAFD responses by division per fiscal year. So breaking it down by division, fire and EMS. This slide illustrates the total number of responses by EMS and fire units. While we see a slight decline in EMS unit responses, fire unit responses have remained consistent. These numbers reflect ongoing demand for emergency services and the importance of strategic resource allocation. So this next slide is SAFD responses by division, first quarter, October through December. First quarter of each fiscal year, we observe a decrease in both fire and EMS responses from fiscal year 2023 through fiscal year 2025, and this could indicate fire prevention efforts or fluctuations in emergency demand. Next slide is SAFD response times. So this is one of our key performance metrics. This slide compares our medical and non-medical times across fiscal years. While our response times remain within acceptable range, we do see a slight increase year after year. And we continue to utilize other resources and think outside the box as far as operational efficiency. This slide is top 10 medical call types for fiscal year 24. Sick person remains the most common call type, followed by motor vehicle collisions and falls. So these statistics help guide our training, resource deployment, and public safety education initiatives. Working structure fires for the first quarter, October through December. Here we see a decline in working structure fires over the past 3 fiscal years, with an average of 0.28 fires per day in 2025. This reduction reflects improvements in fire education and prevention, also code enforcement. This slide illustrates structure fires by council district and provides a breakdown for each of the council districts, 1 through 10, and that offers insight as far as areas experiencing higher volume of calls for working structure fires. So we continue to see, overall, we continue to see a steady rise in medical incidents, and structure fires we're seeing a downward trend. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Are we going on to the other item?
Yes, we'll go to SAPD crime stats, and then
Yes,
we'll
ma'am.
take questions. Thank you, Chief.
That was a quick, Val. Good job. Good morning, everybody. So first, we're going to look at FBI reporting requirements, and I'll explain a little bit how we do that now versus how we did it before. We'll look at the crime statistics for 2024, and then finally, some strategies that we use to reduce crime, both violent and property. So I think you may have heard this before from me, but let me refresh, if I may. So it used to be prior to NIBRS, which is a National Incident-Based Reporting System, FBI used to require us report under the Uniform Crime Reporting System. And under Uniform Crime Reporting, there were I believe seven or eight Part 1 crimes. And let me see if I can recite them. Murder, robbery, rape, theft, burglary, vehicle theft, arson, and I think I'm leaving one out, but there were only 8 UCR Part 1 crimes that we used to report on. And when we reported on them, all it was the most serious crime in a criminal event. So if somebody breaks into a house and assaults someone, only the most serious crime got reported. Under NIBRS, which is a National Incident-Based Reporting System, we report all the crime events that happened in one event. So if someone breaks in a house, they assault the owner of the house, they fire a gun at somebody, do something. All those crimes are reported in one report. So it's a much more thorough way of reporting crime. It captures everything that happens in one criminal event. So there's Group A, which are the most serious crimes, the crimes against persons, property, and society, and then Group B offenses, which are, there's only 10 of those, and they're only reported if an arrest is made. Now, what does 24 categories mean of Group A, and what is an offense type? So one example, so homicide would be one of the 24 categories. And the event types that would come under homicide would be justified, murder, or manslaughter. So that's what the 50 offense types are under the heading of the main offense. Under Group B, the 10 categories, you have, just to mention a few, you have bad checks, you have curfew violations, disorderly conduct, DWI, peeping Tom, trespassing, those sorts of events, or those sorts of offenses come under Group B. In 2024, we received over 2.2 million calls. And out of those 2.2 million calls, SAPD officers responded 1.8 million times. So you've got all those calls coming into dispatch, and you've got SAPD responding to all those calls, which is keeps everybody busy on the street and everybody busy down dispatch. Our response times, looking back to 2022, our emergency response times have improved every year. Currently, it's 5 minutes and 56 seconds. Our non-emergency times, we went up in 2023 from 2022, but we're down by a couple seconds this year versus last year. And then our arrests, I would say if I could capture what's going on out there in one sentence, it would be crime is down, workload is up. Crime is down, workload is up. So our workload, looking at arrests, has gone up every year since 2022. And pretty much every time you look at the comparison from the previous quarter, our arrests are going up. And what these arrests do, it maintains order on the street, and detectives are clearing their cases. Our NIBRS stats, looking back again at 2022, we have a 2.4% decrease in crimes against persons, crimes against property, pretty good drop, 7.7% decrease. And crimes against society, it shows that it's up, but crimes against society are typically reported only when there's an arrest made. So again, workload is up. And then looking at crimes against persons, all violent crime categories have decreased. Homicides and sex offenses have decreased significantly. And the only increase we had was in non-forcible sex offenses, and you see one there for an increase of 100%. So that is the only category that we did not see a decrease in. And then crimes against society, again, we see a 1.5% increase, primarily because arrests are up in those categories. And then crimes against property, lastly, they decrease with the exception of criminal mischief. Destruction or damage or vandalism is not listed in the Texas Penal Code. It is classified as criminal mischief. Criminal mischief. So that is the only offense category that we did not see a decrease in, except for bribery, that remained the same. And then finally, I would say that the strategies that we use to reduce crime include a combination of enforcement and working with the community. And together, these strategies we think help us work better with the community in reducing crime and reducing the fear of crime. And that's it for my presentation. And if you have any questions, myself or any of my staff members will be happy to answer them. No questions?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye. I have to be quicker than that. Thanks, Chief McManus and Chief Fausto. I'll start with you, Chief. Congratulations to the entire police force. Our residents have repeatedly told us that they want to feel safe in our neighborhoods, and I think we can be proud of the progress that we've made together. It's the overall, the evidence-based strategies that we've implemented, that crime is down overall by what percent? Is it
Violent crime is down, I think, 2%. Overall, it's, was it 7?
Is it close to 6?
5.9.
Yeah, so close to 6%. I think that's pretty significant, especially given the fact that you mentioned that the workload is up.
Correct.
So that's significant drops in property crimes, like car thefts, things like that. So I really think that shows that our targeted approaches, like the hotspot policing, our expanded patrols, and then, just good old-fashioned police work that you guys do is really working. So I appreciate that. I know that there's always more work to do, but I want to acknowledge that's significant, a 6% decrease in the last 2 years, close to 6%, right? So thank you. I want to move over to Chief Fausto real quick. I just want to kind of make a quick point that when Chief Fausto was first appointed, I think one day later she came to District 6 and talked with the community and just did a bang-up job. And I think I'm really proud of the job that you're doing, and I think you're leading the fire department in a really positive way. And thankful to all our firefighters for the dedication. And just a reminder, again, as we move into budget season, that we're making sure that our firefighters and our law enforcement officers have the equipment and the backup that they need to keep us all safe. I don't actually have any questions. I just want to make some comments. Any comments
Thank you, ma'am.
from the Councilman White?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thank you, Chief Fausto and Chief McManus. Appreciate the presentations and all of the work. My first question, Chief Fausto, was on, in the first quarter of 2025, it looks like increase in nearly 700 medical calls, 500 non-medical calls. Any particular reasons? Is the trend typical for the first quarter of the year?
Yes, I would say so. And it's also just, it tends to have ebbs and flows, and every year is different. Hard to forecast.
Any factors you think that contribute to that?
I would say possibly weather may have an impact on the number of MVCs, motor vehicle collisions, and also structure fires. So that could have an impact, but there's several variables that we would consider.
Okay. More generally, are there any additional resources that you think the fire department needs as you look forward for the rest of 2025 and beyond?
Well, our focus remains on processing the incoming calls, gathering, facts from the call taker, and based on the information that we receive, we dispatch the most appropriate and closest unit. So we've started to incorporate enhanced squads in our response packages, and just sending fewer units to increase the availability of other units to respond to other calls.
Okay, and speaking of the availability of other units, there was an incident over the holidays, over the Christmas break,
Yes, sir.
where one of the stations in my district, the main engine was in the shop, I guess. It needed some repair. And there was a period of time, I believe, a few hours, maybe 6 hours, where we did not have a backup full fire engine ready to go. I don't think we should be allowing that to happen, number one. Why was that the case? And what can we do moving forward to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again?
Yes, sir, and I do recall that particular incident, and we have addressed it with the fire department facilities and maintenance. For that day, there was an issue with the readiness of our spare units, and I can assure you that it will not happen again. In normal cases, we do move up units so that they're closer to the response area to provide coverage during the downtime.
Okay, so it was an issue with just having, did you say repair parts or alternate
Yes,
vehicles available?
That was actually just some batteries that we did not foresee them being dead, so the spare unit needed to have a battery replacement.
Yeah,
So that was the reason for the downtime.
okay, but we're confident going forward, we've
Yes,
got
sir,
that
we have
corrected.
established other processes to ensure that does not happen again.
Okay, great, thank you so much. Of
course.
Chief McManus, a couple of things here. It looks like response times, we've made good progress. From emergency call response times down about 24 minutes. How'd we do that?
Good question.
Or 24 seconds, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, 24 minutes, 24
Yeah.
seconds, yeah. Operational changes, I mean, is that a big change or no?
No, I mean, it's a significant improvement in reducing response time, yeah. You know, it's just a matter of the call volume and how quickly the officers are able to get on them, how quickly they're able to clear certain calls, and how quickly they'll be able to get to the next one. So, you know, I don't know that there's any magic formula to this, but, you know, I've always said that, you know, if you want to reduce response times, you either reduce the number of calls, the types of calls that we respond to, or you increase the number of patrol officers handling those calls.
And Councilman, to add to what Chief mentioned, is patrol availability. So as Chief mentioned, as the council has approved more additional officers to be added in the last few years, we're beginning to see the results of more patrol on the street. More work to do, but that's one of the benefits of having officers. Their availability has increased.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, Maria, and that's what we've been talking about for 2 years, right? More officers on patrol, the quicker we can get to some of these crimes and stop and deter the crime before it happens.
Right, and we're just now getting that initial batch of 117 new officers from the previous budget on the street. So it's not like all those 117 were just on the street,
Yep.
ready to go. They're just starting to get out of the academy now, just starting to get out on their own. So that as they continue to graduate, you'll see that
Continued improvement there.
yes.
Yep, okay, great. The chair mentioned the hotspot policing program. Can you briefly, are we still seeing results there?
We are. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but yes, we are still seeing improvement there. That's not something that we're going to discontinue.
Yeah, okay. Last question, the downtown camera plan, right? Tell me about that and how we're utilizing it to prevent not just violent crimes, but also property crime.
Well, those cameras aren't quite up yet, Councilmember.
How are
They're
we going to do it?
Still in the process, yeah. We have hired additional, Rick, do you want to talk about this? You were.
Councilman, my name's Rick Riley. I'm the Assistant Director for SAPD. So as Chief was starting to mention, we've hired 4 call takers to be at the PSAP to monitor those camera feeds, with the idea being, since they're trained, they'll be able to recognize something that's happening immediately during specific times of the day. Now, we're going to have those people work from 3 to 11 daily. That's when the highest call volume occurs in those downtown corridors where the cameras will be employed, and there'll be an immediate response from them to the dispatchers to get police officers on scene as quickly as possible in case there's an incident that occurs in that area.
Okay, and do we know the estimated, what we think the response time is going to be from where the officers will be coming from to the location in downtown?
Well, it will depend on where the officers are when they're dispatched, right? So bike patrol's right downtown, right there. St. Mary's substation is downtown, so it should be quick, but I don't have an estimate for you right now, Councilman.
Yeah, because we're going to need to make sure it's a coordinated effort between the folks, obviously, looking at the camera feed and whoever's down there.
Yes, sir.
To actually have it be effective. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman White. Councilwoman Alderte Garito.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a few quick questions. I'll start with Chief Rosto. Thank you so much for the presentation. Hold on, I put this here. On slide 7, for the sick persons, how many of these are repeat callers?
I don't have that
Like just a general
information.
percentage, yeah.
I don't have that data, but I could get that for you.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how many of them are repeat callers in, out of like 12 months, or, some folks calling 10 months out of the year. And the reason I'm asking that is because I want to see if there's something that we could potentially be doing something differently to make sure that we're providing them the care that they need, but not tying up our valuable fire department resources.
Yes, ma'am. And we do have for what we call HVUs, high volume users, we do have programs in place that will address, the individuals that are frequent callers. So there are measures being taken. I just, I don't have the data with me at this
Yeah,
point in time.
no, and if you don't mind following up, so we
Yes.
can see that data and understand it. And again, we want to make sure they're given the care that they need, but also to not necessarily tying up critical resources if there's another way that we could care for them.
Right, and oftentimes it is just a matter of making sure that they get the help that they need and helping with that navigation.
Awesome. Thank you. And then actually, that was it, all I had for the fire. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Chief
Councilwoman.
McManus, I had a few questions. Thank you. I want to applaud the work that y'all are doing to bring down both emergency and non-emergency call time. Thank you for that. On slide 8, in some neighborhoods, it feels like violent crime is going up. And I'm curious if I believe I've asked for this before about how we can see violent crime broken down by district.
What? I'm sorry.
How we can see this violent crime stats broken down by district. Like, I'm curious to see, to let residents know, hey, violent crime might feel like it's going up in District 7, but it's actually going down.
Yeah. We can give you, go ahead, Maria.
I was just going to say, we have on our dashboard today, you can see the crime statistics, the same statistic we showed today by zip code. And I don't remember, Maria, do we already have them by council district?
We do not have it by
Not yet.
council district, but by service area and zip code, where you can see the reported offenses. Most of those make it into the official NIBR stats. If it's a Texas-specific criminal law, then it's not a federal NIBR stat, would be an example. But most of those reported offenses get synthesized into that NIBR stat for violent crime.
But we can get you the ones by district, Councilwoman, but we do have them already by zip code on the dashboard.
Yeah, that will be helpful. Thank you, Maria. And again, the reason why is because we want to be able, people see these city stats and they sound great, but we also want to make sure that we're reiterating what it feels like for them in their neighborhoods and actually what it is. Really quick, I did thank you, Councilman White, for asking about the downtown camera plan. Do we have any plans for rolling that out in other places? I think it was fine in downtown. I wasn't necessarily full in agreement, but there's a lot of other places in our districts that those cameras need to be deployed.
I think at this point, we have not discussed other locations, Councilwoman. That is something that we can probably address as part of the budget process coming up soon.
Yeah, or maybe, I'm not sure if that's an agenda item we have here, because I know there was some of my council colleagues and I saying, yeah, I think we've been asking for some of those cameras for a long time, whether it's illegal dumping or other things where we need those eyes and ears in our districts as well.
I'd also like to note, we will be conducting an evaluation of the efficacy of the technology and its effects on our response times. Like Councilman White mentioned, how fast will we respond? We're going to be evaluating this pilot program to see just how things change and how effective these are, and then we can make some informative decisions from then.
Okay, thank you. And this last question, not necessarily related to the presentation, but one of the things that we hear of and see, obviously in the media, is that people are coming out of jail and hurting our police officers. And so, what are we doing to ensure violent and repeat offenders aren't having the opportunity to reoffend?
I don't know that there's anything that we can do to prevent that from happening, except make an issue of it when it does. It's been a matter I've been concerned about for the last, 3-4 years, and I've not made it a secret.
Right.
I think that there needs to be bail reform looked at the legislature, but I also think that the magistrates need to take a look at what the Texas Constitution says about letting people out on bond. There are exceptions to being able to keep them, to remand them over without bond. And I don't know that that's being looked at all that much.
Okay. No, I think that's helpful, and, obviously, we all want to keep our police officers safe, so we can maybe have an offline conversation about that. Thank you so much, Chief.
ma'am.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Dr. Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of comments. One of the biggest pushbacks that we always get is the non-emergency response time, and it feels like it takes a really long time to figure out non-emergency response times. Like, we asked for it at one location, and it was very difficult for us to get a report that just shows the call, response times for a location. And I would like for that process to be easier. So this is just a general comment where if we could be able to search an address to see what the response time is at that address, even if that's just a council ability, it would really help. At least with when people come to us and say, well, we never get responses, because we get that all the time. I had somebody in my office yesterday that was like, it takes SAPD forever to get out there. And I'm like, well, are you talking about emergency, non-emergency? And it's usually a non-emergency. They have a trespasser or something, and it takes them forever. So I would like for the ability to not have to go through that whole process we went through last time. And I made that comment to them. I said, hey, this takes forever to get from SAPD. We can get it, but we can at least show what the response times actually are. Data is always helpful to make decisions. So it would be great if we could create some kind of system like that. I don't know what that would entail, but just a thought to put out there. And the second is, the data, if you go a couple slides down to the one more, or where it lists all of this slide. Oh, sorry, not this one, the next one after this. Nope. I had it open on I will tell you which slide number. Yeah, that one, sorry, previously. I said this last time too, this data, I still don't know what we do with this, right? So if it seems like we get this presentation every year and it's a report that you all submit, but we don't actually take it and make determinations of what our action is going to be based on this data. So, for example, I noticed that the whole the Kia motor vehicle theft thing is over, since that line item has dropped. But for the destruction and vandalism, knowing that it's up by 26%, is there an education campaign or something that we could be doing to help around the vandalism increase? So I just always wonder, so what? What is the so what behind this?
And we maybe can expand on some of the strategies that SAPD is working on. So if you go to the next slide, what we tried to do here, Councilwoman, maybe we didn't do a good job. The data that we review with you today, that feeds into how SAPD develops those different strategies, and all that data is utilized. For instance, the Violent Crime Reduction Plan, our comprehensive domestic violence plan, the anti-gang program, the robbery task force, et cetera, et cetera. So all that data feeds all those strategies. So what we're trying to show that all the statistics that we review with you, we use them to enhance those strategies, come up with new ones. So happy to elaborate more.
Yeah, I guess I just don't see that connection, right? We see the report and then we see our overall strategies. And I know these are all the things that we've done and we have in place, but I don't know what of that data is actually informing any of the changes that are being made. So is there any direct, like how often are these folks going back to look at it and make determinations based on, okay, we're going to change our this part of our strategy because we see this change in what's happening in our community. So I just don't see that connection. I see that these are overall what we're doing, but I can't in my mind understand how the domestic violence, and that one's a hard one, but is that changing because of the data from this last year? So that is, I guess, and I don't know who does that work, right? Because SAPD I don't think does. And so who is I know you've mentioned to me before that we have a separate arm that does the analysis of the data, but I just don't, and I know we have our partnership with UTSA that does a lot of research for us, but I just get confused of like, do we have, and I know remember Councilmember McKee Rodriguez, if he were here, would probably talk about he wanted to create that office that just looked at, had an individual person to do kind of some of this work. So that's just what I'm thinking about.
Sure. So a couple of things. So I will tell you, for instance, the individual units within the San Antonio Police Department, for instance, the anti-gang unit or narcotics are looking at that data constantly to develop their strategies and the areas that they need to focus on. As an example, we can try to make more direct connections when we present, to your point. Maria Vargas and her office are doing a lot of detail analysis on this data as well. And we are going to be bringing to this committee the Good Neighbor program to tell you what we have done and how she uses that data to inform those strategies. So we'll expand on those as we continue. But thank you for the feedback.
Of course.
We're trying to incorporate it.
I appreciate it. No, thank you so much for taking that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dr. Kaur. Any other comments? So that was just a briefing item. Thank you, guys. With that, our meeting is adjourned. Thanks so much.